forces, judicial interprets, those are all power.
Hi, welcome back to Mr. Raymond's Social Studies Academy, where today we will be comparing the different regions of colonial America. In our previous couple of videos, we talked about the settling of the 13 colonies, the stories of the people involved, and the motivations of these settlers, so check that one out if you haven't already. And today we will start our look at what life was like for the typical colonist in North America. Now, for most U.S. history classes, you need to compare social, religious, and economic patterns of the different colonies, and we will look at political developments in our next video. In many states, this is where we also get introduced to that terrible chapter in U.S. history, slavery. But before we do, just a reminder, teachers, that this PowerPoint with a variety of resources are available at Teachers Pay Teachers. Click the link in the notes below this video or go to Teachers Pay Teachers and search for Mr. Raymond's Social Studies Academy. So first of all, what does the word colony mean? Well, a colony is land that is settled or taken over by another country. For example, the 13 colonies were settled by European countries, but all of the 13 colonies eventually fell under the control of England. And when we refer to the colonists, we are referring to those living in the colonies, besides the Native Americans who were there first. Most of the colonists were from England, and all of the colonists would eventually be considered British subjects. So when talking about the different regions of colonial America, we divide the colonies up into three sections: New England, the Middle Colonies, and the Southern Colonies. So let's start to the north in New England. New England consists of Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. There was no Vermont yet, and Maine at this point was considered part of Massachusetts. Colonists in New England had to deal with extremely cold winters. While the land along the coast was flat, inland was very hilly and mountainous, and this, combined with a rocky soil, made farming difficult in New England. However, the cold did reduce the spread of disease. Because of the cold climate and bad soil, New England farms were small. Therefore, New Englanders relied on other businesses to make money, such as furs, shipbuilding, fishing, and trading. Timber was desperately needed by England to build ships, homes, furniture, and other goods, and New England had vast forests. New Englanders also often looked to the sea for sources of income and developed an extensive fishing industry that still exists today. Whale oil was a valuable commodity. It was used in lamps and soaps, and Nantucket and other fishing communities developed large whaling businesses. For the most part, the colonists relied on English imports of finished goods, such as glass, linens, paint, and household items, and New Englanders prospered off the Atlantic trading network. What historians refer to as the triangular trade developed between England, Africa, the Caribbean, and North America, as mostly raw materials flowed from the colonies to Europe or England, and slaves and manufactured goods were shipped to the colonies. Boston, New England's largest city, greatly benefited from the triangular trade, developing into a major shipping and trading port. Because New England never developed the large, spread-out farms found in the rest of the colonies, the people there lived closer to each other and had much more social interactions centered around towns. The church was central to New England life. We discussed the strict religious rules and persecution put in place by the Puritans of Massachusetts in a previous video. And while the other New England colonies enjoyed more religious freedom than Massachusetts, there was much less religious tolerance in New England than in the other regions of the 13 colonies. Because of their close proximity, town meetings became an important part of governing local communities. These meetings, while existing in other regions, were especially important in New England in establishing a tradition of self-government and democracy. We will look closer at governing in the colonies in the next video, but remember town meetings in New England as being an especially important part of their social and political makeup. We will also be looking at how England tried to maintain its grip on this growing importance of North American trade. England passed laws such as the Navigation Acts, which mandated that only British ships could trade with the colonies and that all exports had to travel through English ports, in essence blocking their European rivals like France and the Netherlands out of lucrative trade with the colonies. After all, it wasn't just the New England colonies that were taking part in the Atlantic trade network. It was the Middle Colonies as well. The Middle Colonies consisted of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. Now, the Middle Colonies had a much better climate and soil for farming than their neighbors in New England, so farming was a much bigger part of their economy. The Middle Colonies region was known as the breadbasket of the colonies for the large amount of grains they produced. However, the Middle Colonies also contained the two largest cities in America at the time, Philadelphia and New York, which were centers for trade and manufacturing. Of the three regions, the Middle Colonies had the most diverse economy, with its mix of farm goods and manufacturing goods such as paper, textiles, and iron. Craftsmen such as blacksmiths, silversmiths, and cobblers or shoemakers played an important role in the economies of towns and cities of the Middle Colonies. New York and Philadelphia were busy ports, and shipping and trade were lucrative businesses that helped produce more industries in the Middle Colonies. These busy ports shipped the wheat, grains, and oats produced by local farmers to Europe, the Caribbean, and other colonies. Now, it wasn't just the economy that was diverse in the Middle Colonies. As we mentioned in a previous video, the Middle Colonies, led by the example of Quaker William Penn, were much more religiously tolerant of different faiths. And as a result, Quakers, Catholics, Jews, and Lutherans settled in the Middle Colonies. This religious diversity attracted settlers from many different European countries. So in addition to the English, the Middle Colonies had a population made up of Germans, Dutch, Scots-Irish, Swedish, and French. So when you think of the Middle Colonies, think of a diverse place, both in population and in economics. Below the Middle region were the Southern Colonies, made up of Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. The Southern Colonies enjoyed a warm climate with mild winters. With its coastal plains, long growing season, and ideal soil, life in the Southern Colonies was centered around large farms. Of course, its hot climate also brought with it rampant disease. Religion, while important in the South, did not play the central role that it did in the North, and religious tolerance was more widespread in the South, especially compared to New England. Southerners were much more spread out from each other, limiting their social interactions, as life often revolved around plantations and large farms. The Southern economy was built on what are referred to as cash crops, such as tobacco, cotton, rice, indigo, and sugarcane. Tobacco was one of the first cash crops grown in the colonies, dating back to the first North American colony, Jamestown, Virginia. Tobacco and other cash crops required large amounts of labor, and in 1619, a Dutch vessel brought the first 20 slaves into Jamestown. At the time, many settlers came to America as indentured servants who had their passage paid in exchange for working off the price of their ticket to the New World for a certain length of time. However, slavery soon provided much of the labor in the South. As demand for slave labor took hold, the slave trade became part of the Southern economy, especially in Charleston, South Carolina. We will be talking about the terrible legacy of slavery later this year and the division it created between what would become the northern and southern states, culminating with the Civil War, the deadliest war in U.S. history. So that's a look at how these colonial regions differed from each other, but it's important to remember all that they had in common. Colonists enjoyed much more political freedom and participation than their European counterparts, and we will be looking at this in much more detail in our next video. Colonists were healthier and enjoyed a better standard of living than the average European. Colonists enjoyed more social and economic mobility with no hereditary nobility or rigid class structure such as there was in England and Europe. We see the beginnings of that idea of the quote-unquote American dream starting during the time of the 13 colonies. And that's where we'll pick up next time. But before we do, let's review. Because of its cold climate and rocky soil, colonists in this region turned to other economic resources to make a living. New England. Colonists in this region lived the most isolated lives of the three because they were spread out on large farms and plantations. The Southern region. This region enjoyed the greatest diversity of religion and ethnic backgrounds. The Middle Colonies. Slavery, while it existed in all three regions, took the greatest hold here because of the need for large farm labor. The Southern region. This region had the least amount of religious tolerance. They had the strictest rules on religion. New England and the Puritans. This region contained two of the largest cities in colonial America. The middle with New York and Philadelphia. This region was the least involved in the Atlantic trade network. The Southern region. Despite their differences, what did colonists in all three regions have in common? Well, they developed democratic governmental tendencies. Again, we'll be looking at that next. A better standard of living, better health, and they had a lot more in common. And that's it. I want to thank you guys for watching. Be sure to subscribe because up next we're going to look at colonial government. And just a reminder, teachers, that this PowerPoint with lesson plans, worksheets, smartboard activities, quizzes, and more are available at Teachers Paid Teachers. Just click the link in the notes below this video or search for Mr. Raymond's Social Studies Academy at Teachers Paid Teachers. Again, guys, thanks for watching. Keep up that good work.